the canyons of silence. Silence beyond sound, beyond vibration. It isn't so much that words can't be written about it, it's just that nothing can convey it. It's the background to all the noise, all the significance, all the meaningless babble. How simple, how sweetly refreshing that the essence of silence is the center of everything. All the sensations, all the perceptions, all the concepts, actions and reactions, all the feelings, all the space, all the time, all the consciousness. Yet it isn't some isolated something in the middle of nothing. It's nothing in the middle, beginning, end of nothing. Funny how so many things could be written, said, communicated about these canyons, which we'll see. But silence is the only true expression of them. Why did they come here? Why do they come even now? What is it that we're all still seeking? Silence. Nothing but the silence. Recognizing it, we know that somehow something in us transcends space, time, energy, and causality, even in the mere recognition. That's why they painted, chiseled, and built in the most preposterous of places, the most inhospitable and demanding places. They carved and painted their silent attention. Their silent attention into everything they created. Perhaps we too have to actively allow our own silence to awaken us. So vastly deep, so immediate in our inmost closeness, to our inmost closeness. So close that I can't even know myself. Only the silence, only the stillness. Nothing, neither including nor excluding everything. No conditions, no limits. Welcome to the Architects of Conscious Transformation. Previously, we spoke about the very beginnings of art in the Paleolithic, how these primal attempts at conveying something essential even to us today, right this moment, someone, that humanity that we are connected to, tried to communicate something vital and essential. And through that attempt at communication of something really vital and important to what our potentials are as a humanity, as a species that is able to consciously evolve, consciously, not just accidentally, but consciously evolve, it seems that certain types of works created by humans and not by humans were made so that we would somehow awaken to their message, awaken to whatever it is that long ago in the apparent past that we gave and sent to ourselves in the present, but in the far future at that point. So what have we been trying to tell ourselves? What message have we been trying to convey? So you can see the vitality, the energy, the full force of the postures. Someone mentioned that, so like for example, some of the human forms where that could be accessed through shamanic trance. That is true. That could be a very useful way of interpreting those kinds of images. The dancer, remember that? And just some of the beautiful feminine sculpting and painting, but mostly sculpting that we've seen. It's obviously true that the feminine was a very powerful element in our early humanity, if you will, in the earlier stages of our humanity, and it was a very powerful kind of focus, that the feminine and the masculine were somehow co-responsible, co-creating reality, whatever that was. But here, now, today, these messages are, I feel, more important, even more important than they may have been at the time of origination, because they tell us of potential humanities that we have already been. And so, if it's postures, if it's other kinds of messages, the real message, I feel, is that there is something of our humanity calling out to us. Calling out to us because it does. It's a fact that all of these artifacts, whether they're art, architecture, or any kind of tradition that's come down to us from our predecessors, those whom we are the descendants of, these messages are vitally important for us to integrate, because they speak of something that is pure, that is untamed in a sense, and yet able now to direct itself consciously. And this message comes through in many other things. So we went from the Paleolithic to the cultures of the American Southwest, where the canyons of silence, which you just heard, was dedicated to. The silence is real in these spaces, and it was no wonder that the people who lived here for most of the history of this continent, or the North American continent, would so deeply rever the earth and everything of it. It is a sacred, a very special, powerful place. And perhaps it began that way in terms of architecture. It was already built. You came into these gigantic masterpieces of colossal proportion, staggering proportion, that mankind, no matter how far they've gone, have never been able to equal in terms of the sheer majesty and the sheer presence and consciousness of many of these locations. It's absolutely stunning. This is Bryce Canyon in southern Utah. And so we are given these messages. And so the way the messages were given through the American Southwestern cultures was through opening up to the reality of what the planet, the earth, as our teacher and as our sustainer and as our ultimate place of evolution, highest possible potential, is here. It's right there, teaching us everything we need to know in order to evolve in the greater universe. Now, as one can see, the scale and the beauty and the intricacy is just staggering. There is a natural eurythmy, a natural proportion that cannot be rivaled by anything humans have created in nature. And it is from nature that we derive our intelligence and our consciousness. That somehow this planet is as conscious as we are, or more so, because it has helped to generate us. There is no accident that way. Therefore, there's no accident that the universe is also conscious if it's able to produce consciousness like this, that is able to be intelligent about itself, to wish to consciously evolve. In other words, to direct the flow of the evolution that it takes, that species, that consciousness, which is humanity on this planet. And so, the earth and all of nature are revered in the Southwest cultures, and they've built their abodes right into the earth. And in the kivas, one once again experienced reconnection with the point of emergence. These cultures looked at emerging from the center rather than going out to an infinite circumference, as our general culture has done a lot of the time. They want to go out to the infinite beyond, whereas these cultures want to go to the infinite centerless center through the core. So, two different approaches, and yet ultimately the goal is the same, but there is indeed a great reverence and a great respect and a great adoration of the earth and of all of the natural forces that have enabled to arrive at where we are. And then we went on to the Mesoamerican cultures, the great traditions of all those peoples a little bit further south than the American Southwest. All the Mayan and Olmec, the Aztec, the Toltec, the Teotihuacan cultures, all of them had this common theme, in a sense, of Quetzalcoatl. Quetzalcoatl, the serpent that flies, the flying serpent. The Kukulkan of the Maya, the Quetzalcoatl of the Toltecs and the Aztecs, and perhaps the Teotihuacan culture. But in every every one of those cultures, this motif, the Monte Alban cultures also had a version of Quetzalcoatl. And so, really, the importance of this being was all-pervasive in those cultures, right from Mexico to Central America. And that was because the theme was all important. The theme in Mesoamerican cultures, all of them, was that humanity had an obligation to support the universe, to support the very existence of the sun, of everything, actually. Originally, there was a great teaching that was present, a wisdom teaching that embodied power and wisdom, which is what Quetzalcoatl is about. The serpent part may be the DNA, the human being we came in with. The Quetzal, the bird of paradise, the bird of ascension, of awakening, if you will, that is what a human being is intended to become, and Quetzalcoatl was a manifestation of that, very Christ-like in every way. A great teacher, a great disseminator of wisdom, of practical arts, of everything, of growing food, of magic, of every possible occupation that humanity could engage in. Quetzalcoatl delivered to all these people as a gift to mankind of a path to transformation and transcendence, because that's what Quetzalcoatl is about. The rising above the mortal aspect and going beyond it, and in fact maybe becoming embodied in both those realms. So it's the fusion, the integration of humanity with the deity, and the deified heart was the core teaching of all of these cultures before it turned into what some Europeans claimed was happening with various types of sacrifice. The real sacrifice of the deified heart, the teaching of that, and the practice of that was what Quetzalcoatl was manifesting. That one purified, one basically opened up one's physical heart and created a heart through conscious efforts, through conscious experiencings, making efforts that were beyond one's present capability, but still attempting them, and going beyond and being, in that sense, alchemically transformed. And through that, the deified heart would shine through one's real face, one's true face. The face that we all came here with before it had any type of feature to it. It is the face of everything and nothing. And that face was what would be shone through by the deified heart. This heart of compassion, of love, of conscience. These were the gifts that were then sacrificed, but not sacrificed in the sense of ripping something away and then offering it as some gory offering. No. This was about giving something greater than what one came in. One had actually created something beyond oneself. Out of one's presence here, out of one's attention here, out of one's will to be true and clear. And that's what Quetzalcoatl's heart was about. His sacrifice was that he left it for all of us to follow in that way. And the return is very similar to some other traditions. The thing is that the deified heart was what was offered up to the universe, to the cosmos, to the sun. And that deified heart is what makes the universe move, not in a cyclical, degenerating cycle of decay. No. It's that newness, that fresh creation from out of ourselves is what was offered up to the universe. And that is what drives everything. That is what evolves the universe. That is what keeps it going. It's the conscious efforts. It's the conscious taking on and transcending of suffering. It's the conscious giving of beauty out of that which appears not to be. That kind of effort, that kind of essence, contribution, gift, if you will, is the present that was offered through this culture. So that's Mesoamerica. And so, welcome to the next chapter of our journey. The next chapter of our journey goes further south into the continent south of North America and Central America. And in those cultures, in that part of the world, once again, something beyond imagining happened there, was created there. And it still keeps us awake to the possibility that something from beyond what we are is either present here or is pointing us, drawing us on to the potential of our true humanity as a universal species. Yeah, as a universal species. So here we go. And of course this is now a satellite photograph of Nasca. Everyone's heard about Nasca in some way, I'm sure, but truly, when they set up the first astronauts, this is one of the things they looked for from outer space. The first time that they sent the early missions into outer space was to see if they could actually see the Nasca lines. And apparently they could. And now this is a mountainside, and so one has to wonder who would have done this particular work. I mean, who are they trying to communicate with? Because apparently you really can't see this. It's so big that you can't actually see it from the ground, and yet from the air, like way up, you can see that there's this humanoid figure with big eyes. Now remember the big eyes thing? You saw this in the Great Gallery. In the Great Gallery. And nobody really knows how old these things are. They claim BC or some, but you know, it's thousands of years old, but really scientists don't really have a real clue as to what the age of these are. But this looks like one of those big-eyed beings. How interesting that these kinds of commonalities were present. And when we go further from South America, you'll see the same big-eyed kind of expression in the Sumerian culture as well. So here we go. This is undoubtedly a humanoid figure and can only be seen from the air. Oh. And I even got water. So here we have it. They've identified this as a hummingbird. Now, anyone who knows something about hummingbirds is that they're really tiny. So this image is like hundreds and hundreds of yards wide. I mean, it's really wide and big. And to me, it seems to speak of an abstraction in art that is absolutely exquisite. It's one of the great pieces of art on the planet. I mean, these figures are truly masterpieces. And that's the one thing that nobody actually mentions, that these are masterpieces. Look at the actual detail and the boldness and the vitality of this. I mean, whoever created this was immensely artistic and genius in my understanding of the real word. I mean, this conveys such vitality and essential information. People nowadays recognize the hummingbird, like truly, and why they would make a hummingbird this huge that can mostly only be seen from above, way up above, is once again the theory of much speculation about who or what it's for, but it's obvious that it's pointing at something bigger than human scale, that is above us, literally, elevation-wise, and it's almost like a God's eye view of us that they wanted to see, that they wanted something to give up to the universe. Now that may seem like such a simplistic idea, but I think this is it, that it's the giving up, that we need to do this. We need to do this in order to sort of fulfill our obligation as human beings. And they did it. They left these, and what looked like airstrips too, on this beautiful plain, and it's just crisscrossed and zigzagged with these beautiful works of art. This is my favorite, the spider. It's absolutely brilliant. It's brilliant in its execution, and that's what I'm talking about. We're at least 2,000, 3,000 years after, and we instantly know what this is. This is a spider to us, and it's very good anatomically and all the rest of it. It's gorgeous art. And the astounding skillfulness, the astounding intelligence of whoever created this, that's never gone into. That these beings, whoever they were incredible in terms of what they were trying to transmit to us. That it isn't really the image per se, but the power and the presence of it that really conveys a message to us. Yes, it's an ordinary looking creature that we have on our planet, but look at the force and the energy that has been attributed to this being. A spider. Yeah. An insect to us, most of us. But to these individuals, this warranted a great deal of reverence, attention, and real skill in conveying the energy of this being. So this, from what I can see, it's pretty, unfortunately you're not going to see much because there's not much here either, but it's a bunch of hands, you know, like a tree with hands coming out. I don't know if you can see that because it's such a small screen that you're probably seeing this on, but the point is that it's once again highly symbolic. Look at this, a tree. Now I don't know, I'll try and trace this. This is the bottom of the tree, but these are the branches, and they go off in hands all the way up this tree. I mean, this is a beautiful work of art. Again, these were higher intelligences. They were passing on symbolic knowledge to us, if only we would be able to understand and read it. I mean, the tree is the tree of giving. It's the tree of offering. This is incredible stuff. When we look at it in this way and look at it as a message to ourselves, to what we are as present-day humanity, then we get to understand that we've been trying to get to us. Whoever we were before this was trying to reach us now. That there's a message, that we have a great giving that we need to give of ourselves. Of ourselves. So, let's begin. I'm just going to take a quick stroll off camera. And so, when we are confronted with some of the examples of architecture and art that have happened in the South American continent, of course, we go to the Inca. Now, the previous example was the Nasca culture on the plains of Peru, and this is also in Peru. But the Inca were all the way up the entire length of South America, right from Chile all the way to Ecuador, I believe. And this is the last empire. But here we have, once again, a culture that was highly developed, but Paleolithic technology or paleotechnology. They weren't in the Stone Age, but they had stone technology, although they had other things as well afterwards. But the thing that's really astounding, of course, is the architecture that's left. Of course, nothing much of the smaller art is left because it was melted down by Europeans. So the great works of art that were able to be moved and taken were totally. So an entire culture was eviscerated. But here's the remainder of it. What did remain and what does stand is a testament to, once again, that American continent attitude toward the earth. These people, these cultures were solar in their focus, that the Inca was a direct descendant of the sun, much like the Egyptians were descended from Ra. The pharaohs were descended from the sun, Ra. But here, the massiveness of the architecture, and at the same time the subtle fineness of the way it was constructed, it defies description. Normally, something like this, although it's carved and worked and dressed, ashlar masonry, as it's called, dressed masonry, fine surfaces. You know, you don't leave the rough edge of a stone or anything. It's there, as you can see. This is in Machu Picchu, I believe. A wonderful, wonderful location. Except I wonder what this slide is doing here. But in this particular view, you can see that the culture of the Inca built in accordance with kind of a uniformity or harmony with nature. The buildings are built on a mountain slope now. Who would build these incredible structures like that? But they did. And they did it with the basically stacked masonry, where there was a lot of weight just carried by the by the walls. So not much in terms of light. There were narrow slits as windows to let light in, but they were pretty cave-like still. Not as, you know, they did their best though. They definitely tried for lighting inside, but the lintel, the post and lintel style of architecture, where you just have a heavy, solid structure like a pillar or a big rock, and you stick it on top of that and just hang it. Just by the sheer mass and the strength of the materials, you can put some sort of a top over things, but that's the doorways. They did a lot of that, where they just sort of leaned things on top and had the posts on either end supporting. And that's the architecture, but the fineness of the work is astounding, to say the least. There's no cement, no mortar of any kind, and these stones are just absolutely flat, and yet irregular. They used the irregularity of the stones actually to create more strength. The irregularity basically distributes energy much better and will not break apart as regularly spaced masonry. So this is in fact higher design, in my opinion. And there's there it is, the post and the lintel, kind of standing, a corbelled roof. No, it's not even corbelled, it's just post and lintel, and they're just little squares, and you just go through them, and that's it. But that was needed in order to, you couldn't put big holes in the structure, otherwise it would fall apart. It would give the wall too many weak points. So, and as once again you can see, there's the post and lintel one more time. Incredible how they were able to fashion. This is called Cyclopean architecture or masonry, because the boulders aren't finished and they're uneven. This is rather on the other side, that side, on your left, I would think. You can see that the stone is not dressed, it's not cut. On the right side, it seems to be a little bit better trimmed. You know, it seems to be a lot flatter in some ways, although it may be just an illusion in terms of closeness and the other side. But you can see though that irregular pieces are fitted to one another with great accuracy, and incredible accuracy. And I've seen people try to stick dimes in between these stones, and they can't. It's perfect. The cuts are astonishingly good for anyone, even today. And just the way that you can see, it's all irregular. This would be called Cyclopean, but it's not. It is highly refined. It's not just a jumble of boulders you stack to make a wall and putty it together with mud. This is fashioned and intentionally so, and it's a statement about strength and endurance. And the irregularities in these structures keep them up. And this place, I think this area of the world, it has some pretty good earthquakes, and they must have known this, or volcanic eruption. And yet they built these edifices, the ones that weren't torn down, to last, and they do, even today. And once again, these are gigantic. Like, the size of these monolithic stones is like hundreds or even more tons each. And how they were able to move this and then just make these perfect cuts. It's almost as if they're taking, it's almost like sculpting. Inca architecture is almost like sculpting your buildings, where you have abstract art just playing with all these different forms, and they want to take the form that exists in nature and to just adjust it a little bit so that it'll stand as a structure, but as an integrated structure. And when you take the best in nature and you integrate it with everything else in this way, I mean, look at the amazing results. Uh, like I said, this is probably a 20-foot high wall. So those are gigantic stones. And once again, I mean, to be able to carve a mountainside like that, a boulder that size, and with such accuracy, and it's you know, the artistry of this is amazing. It's not just a building. This will awe anyone at any time, no matter how long this lasts. It'll create awe in the beholder that someone actually did something with this much reverence for the natural, and yet was able to harmoniously integrate this into a structure of their own, you know, a living space, or at least a space of adoration for the universe, or at least the adoration that was being sent. So once again, this art and architecture speaks of a level of sophistication that is hard to grasp. It looks unusually simple, and yet it is so profound in its impact. Just a wall. How many walls can you look at anywhere in the world where you'll look at the wall and just say, whoa? And that's what you do when you see this. You say, whoa, this is amazing. And it was amazing. And so that this part of our humanity, this amazing, asymmetrically harmonious part of our humanity has left us this, is for us to take and learn. This is part of our evolutionary education. Take a look. This is your legacy. Make use of it. Understand what it really means. That'd be good. And so we go from South America, incredible South America, that definitely makes us think of that which is beyond ourselves. Not just in terms of alien visitors from other solar systems or whatever systems, but it makes one look at the actual gifts that we have as a species, that we have great gifts, great artistic, great creative, great cosmically beautifying gifts. And let's use them. Let's take that example, take all the examples that have been left us, and use that as an inspiration to what we can do right now. We can create masterpieces. I think this is, well, this is a priest scribe from Sumer, about, I don't know, 5,000 years old now, close. This is Abigail from the Temple of Mari. The Temple of Mari, which was dedicated to the goddess, I believe, Inanna, the great goddess, the great feminine. And as you can see, big eyes. At that time in our history, whether there was any contact or not, there was a conscious connection in terms of what are those big eyes telling us? What happens when we open our eyes like that? I mean, that indicates really being awake, right? You know, we're open completely. And how many of us get sort of conditioned to not look fully at everything? But this example of the art of the priest of the Temple of Mari, the head priest, Abigail, Sumerian, is transmitting something to us. Now, Sumer is one of the oldest cultures on the planet. It's claimed that it was the oldest civilization, but there may be other similar parallel development locations on this planet where there was also concurrently some other human development. But civilization, as we think of it now, seemingly starts from this point, or at least it's one of the points it started from, in the middle, the place between the rivers, Tigris and the Euphrates rivers, in what's now Iraq, and there is the celebrant and the worshipper of Inanna. And the interesting thing about this art that most don't know is that these pieces of art were created in the presence of the deity. So this art is truly what would be called sacred, because while in the presence, while in that Holy of Holies sanctuary, the art was created. This wasn't made in some workshop outside. This was directly created from that space of absolute worship, or absolute openness, absolute love, absolute attention, absolute clarity, absolute focus, that kind of intention. And then in that, or as that is happening, this is what's created. This art, therefore, is invocational through presence. This is what's called art that awakens through presence. And if one just hangs out with Abigail, you'll see. If you've been looking at Abigail as the talk has been going on, you'll have noticed that there is a definite posture, right? A posture, and it's got the secret handshake that you can't see. But on this one, not. But on others, there is a sort of a handshake. It's impossible. You know, it's like this, except the thumb comes over on the other side. And that represented the transcendence. Transcendence and being in this world at the same time. So it's being the impossible while we are here. And so Abigail, of course, was of that culture that created these beautiful temples to the divine feminine, but it also had the beginnings of all that we know of as our civilization, which is everything that goes on now was blueprinted in Sumer. And so this was the center of their lives then. This adoration of the divine and creating one's work in that presence. Think about it. Think about it. Creating your greatest work while you are in the most enlightened, awakened state possible. That is what is being transmitted through this art and architecture. And sure, they built big. You know, they built on stepped, almost stepped pyramids with temples on top. So in a sense, it's kind of almost like a cross between Mesoamerican, where they have a temple at the top of a platform, but more of a stepped pyramid too. And so this was in Uruk, and the Anu Ziggurat, at least the top of it. But you can see it's a ramp going up. And that's how you can imagine processions going up here in celebration, and what, like I said, adoration. Adoration seemed to have been a higher feeling. But adoration not just for someone, somebody, but for that which is the force that is behind everything that exists. That kind of adoration, that kind of what would be called objective or transcendental adoration, something that you don't get anything for it necessarily. But it is in effect that gift, once again, from the being, from the very core of one's truth, whatever that may be. That adoration is what's given up. And so here we have a schematic once again. Oh, this is in Ur of the Chaldees. Yeah. Where the patriarch of three religions, Abraham, came from. Ur. And this incredible structure, you can see that there are these steep ramps, almost like escalators, divine escalators taking one through the different levels. Once again, 1, 2, 3, 4. The fifth has the temple, the sacred sanctuary on it. So it's talking about what? Ourselves again. We just build outside of ourselves what's within us. And so this particular ziggurat is an example of what was on everyone's mind at the time. Going up, ascension, evolving, so it seems. And here's one of the real things, as you can see. And that's what it actually looks like. Yeah, very big. One thing I think that's noticeable about anything that humanity has created for the benefit of future generations is that there was a wish for it to be noticed. And this definitely is noticeable when you think of how high and just massive this structure is. But once again, it's alternating brick style, even a little bit of almost like buttressing. And then you go up this incredible staircase that leads to the Holy of Holies, way up on top. So it's a journey, not just spatially, but an internal journey as one ascends the levels. And once again, this schematic shows, and it looks very much like some of the pyramids that are in Mesoamerica, like the Temple of the Niches and so forth. This beautiful design has been somehow spontaneously discovered, or at least maybe it's part of our consciousness, and we just build it out in varying ways. And so here's that. And it's very, very much this kind of progression, one step at a time, that allows one to build these incredible structures. One stone at a time, you build the pyramid. And that's Sumer. And with Sumer, it's interesting because, in a sense, that's one of the cradles, one of the, nurseries of human civilization for this cycle of civilizations. I mean, in the last 5,000 years, but we saw earliest on, like almost 300,000 years ago, there was already an indication of a very deep intelligence and understanding of profound principles in that humanity, that predecessor of our own species, the one that we eventually branched off from to become this particular species, Homo sapiens. But the thing is that with everything that's been presented, it's always been it's seemingly a gift that's been passed on, knowingly, that someone knew that someone else would see this, and that someone is all of us. And we need to take heed of what that message is about. So we're going to visit, of course, the culture that is, in effect, the most stunning example of early civilization, and at the same time, still an enduring beacon to us in terms of still we may be able to learn something of essential value from the ancient Egyptians. And of course, this is a prime example, once again, of presence. And you can see the eyes are open. The eyes are open, and that message is meant to convey something, that you're not asleep, you're awake, you're attentive, and you're poised in perfect equilibrium. This is known as a krupi, the scribe, but the scribe was also the magician who lived in the house of life. So scribes were, in fact, magical conveyors of higher information, or at least more evolved, more conscious information. And so this is a prime example of transmission through presence. Look at a krupi. Just look into his eyes. He's staring at us across 4,000, 5,000 years. He's looking at us, and he's looking in a certain way. He's looking with complete balance, complete focus, impartiality. But yet there is a very, for me, a very affirming, kind of open, how can I put it, compassion in this posture as well. This work conveys not only presence and attention, but real compassion, real equilibrium. And this is an example for all of us that a Krupi is basically manifesting, you might say, an objective or a real transformational posture, a posture of transformation, where you noticed in some of the earlier stuff there was movement in that posture, you know, the dancer. And you could tell that there was dynamic energy in it. This is like rock solid. You're not going to move this. This is an unshakable presence, an unshakable compassion, and an unshakable wakefulness. A Krupi pays attention for all of us across the ages. And anyone who sees and looks into his eyes will understand that. So, a Krupi. So we start off Egypt with a Krupi. And in the Old Kingdom, this is the Pyramid of Zoser, built by the great architect, the one who started pyramids in Egypt. Although, as you could see, there were also already ziggurats. A pyramid is, you know, like a lot of it is stone. So there's fill, but there's a lot of, there's building, there's intentional building on the interior. Whereas a lot of the other pyramids that have been built were not hollow. They didn't have rooms inside them. The Egyptian ones began that, I think they began that tradition of putting chambers inside these massive mountains that they created. But these mountains had a function, and a function that is beyond scientific speculations about its use. But the architect, Imhotep, one of the great figures in human history, created the first Egyptian pyramid at Saqqara. Excuse me. It was, in fact, sort of like Jerusalem, Saqqara was. It was like a royal necropolis, but it was a place of reverence for the sun, but the vitality of the sun. But we get into something that is far beyond that at a certain point when we go through our little journey through Egypt and its architecture and art. There is so much of it in Egypt, though, and some of it's so finely done that there's nothing that compares to it. This is an incredible aerial view of the Great Pyramids at Giza. In the early 1900s, being a photographer, I'm just always knocked out by the brilliance of some of these photographers from the early days of photography and what they were able to do. Somebody took a balloon. A balloon is the best thing to take a photograph from. It's way better than an airplane, because airplanes are flying too fast. Here you can take it in as long as you want. It just goes by, crawls by slowly, and you get incredible view and resolution of this. So there it is, the Great Pyramids during the early, over 100 years ago. And obviously they stand out. They stand out like nothing else. There's nothing there. It's all flat. And these pyramids are just a monument to this unbelievable energy that was unleashed in that sector at that time. So, Old Kingdom, well, I guess, yeah, this is Old Kingdom. Pyramid of Cheops and so forth, and Khephren. And then also there's the Great Sphinx. All of these works are meant not just to be a momentary monument to some ego trip. Not at all. And no matter how much people nowadays, at least certain interpreters, want to think that, there was an actual cosmic purpose to all of this. And the pharaohs weren't there just to have things better for themselves. They had a real function in a cosmic drama. Or maybe a cosmic love play would be a better way of putting it. But there was a real attempt at transmitting higher orders of existence to the earthly plane. And so the pyramids being conveyors to that point of transcendence, that point of surpassing the horizon, are just an incredible monument to the efforts and also the skill and the sheer intention it took to create something this awe-inspiring and this lasting. I mean, they're the last remaining remnants of all the great works of the world, the great wonders of the world. This is the only one. These are the only ones that are remaining now intact, are the Great Pyramids at Giza, and all over Europe, not Europe, all over Egypt. But the Sphinx is thought by some to be even older. No matter how much people want to debate it, it's an incredible message. Once again, it's a message. This was, I think, from the 1800s, when the French were still there. It was still buried in the sand, a lot of it. There were no tourists there. It was a forbidding land. And now this is what's been rebuilt of the great Sphinx. But obviously, the Sphinx represents a certain kind of equilibrium that is unshakable. It was meant to be that. The body of the lion, and may have had wings. Who knows what? But the thing is that all of these attributes represent not just power but stability, and there's an impartiality. If you look at the eyes and if you look at the face, there is unquestionably a sense of seeing beyond, of having those eyes of eternity open, the eyes that look into eternity. And they've been looking back at us for however many thousand years there are. But it's the one thing that you can't explain away. One of the things, anyway. One of the things that humans can't explain away. Why this? And why? Why a guardian like this? Why looking just out into infinity, as it were? Just implacable and impartial. Once again, that impartiality. This represents a certain kind of presence. And if we take that presence, that grounded presence, where there's this real groundedness, and yet the ability to spring, the ability to move, the ability to spontaneously create and act from that. I mean, the Sphinx. And he's wearing the headdress of a pharaoh, which means that it's a divine manifestation. It's an invitation to that. This is coming from our own humanity. We have to understand this. This is coming out of ourselves as a species that can create and evolve, and hopefully consciously evolve. And then we come, of course, to the great temple at Karnak, in what was then called Thebes, and, or at least by the Greeks it was called Thebes. But the point is, it's one of the greatest temple complexes on this earth, and you can see it's a very big place, and it was completely built up over time, over the 3,000-year history of the ancient Egyptians. Karnak was built up, and Luxor too, were built up as a continuation of the impetus of divine order, if you will, the truth that was coming through the pharaohs and through the initiates that were there. Now you can see the massiveness. The massiveness of those ceiling supports, if you will. And look at the massiveness of the posts that are needed. It's all all based on gravity. It's all based on being grounded, and very much grounded in the earth, but just monumental in its structure. Now this is the basically how an Egyptian temple eventually was built. You have the entryway, you have the sphinxes, and then you have the hypostyle style hall, which is a closed roof kind of enclosure, and huge pillars. And it eventually goes from the front to the back, where the Holy of Holies, the secret space of the deity was, whether it was through an artifact, through a statue, or something else. And here we come to the real life thing. And as you can see, the people, if you can see the people a little bit in the background, and just the monumental hugeness, it was meant to give a sense that there's a larger scale of intelligent force in the universe. And that these beings, these pharaohs were emanations of that force. They were connectors for all of us to be examples for us. Now, I know that that's not the interpretation, but the truth is, those beings existed for us, for the benefit of all of us, for the benefit of all humanity. This was the guidance for conscious evolution. These were the guides that were supposed to be kind of the pharaohs were our guides into higher dimensions of life. It wasn't just a self-aggrandizing scheme where everything was for the pharaoh and, so what? That's, they took and they didn't give back. Or they just did an abstract kind of propitiation of the deities that they were supposedly interacting with. No. This was much more profound, and it was much more daily life too. That there was an understanding throughout the whole culture that we have, in a sense, a higher potential to realize. And that was exemplified by the pharaoh and the royal families. They were divine incarnations. Incarnations that came through to be a guide for all of us in our evolution, in our development as beings. So, repetition. Repetition, repetition, repetition. But there's always variation in it. And of course, there was a great deal of formality to the way temples were constructed. Proportion and symmetry and everything else was created and developed to a high level in Egypt. And you can see the different styles as the different periods of construction went on. But these are probably from looking like the New Kingdom, a lot of them, although some of them could have been a little bit Middle Kingdom. The point is that it doesn't matter what time they're from, it's the quality and the presence and force of information that they have that's really of benefit, because we can make use of that today. So these are the gigantic palm frond pillars with that support at the top that just, I don't know. Apparently you could stand 100 people on top of those things. and I believe it, but there's that post and lintel architecture. And that's as high as it could go. But then you might not want it to go too much higher. where it would fall down, and that is, I guess, the limit of it. That's how high it went, and yeah, apparently those round capping stones, those features, the capitals on top, could actually hold 100 men on top of them. Amazing. More than amazing. And so this is more like a papyrus, set of papyri tied together. Even though it was in the most, I guess, non-corrosive part of the planet, the stone, what was exemplified was organic life. This was organic in the original sanctuaries. The reeds were tied together to form pillars upon which probably a thatched roof or whatever was used. And incredible craftsmanship, incredible intention. This is also like the great obelisk, one of the great obelisks. I mean, this weighs 1,000,000 tons, and it's one piece of rock, one piece of stone. They took one piece of stone that was perfect, that didn't have any cracks and runs, and they made it into, and they gave it the highest height that you could possibly give something like this without it tipping over, and they had it so perfectly planed on the bottom, so perfectly planed for its foundation, that it stands there after thousands and thousands of years, and it's just standing there from its pure balance. It's balanced. That's the only thing that's holding it up. Nothing is holding this up. It's just standing there, maintaining its equilibrium. And these individuals who supposedly didn't have the tools to create this, and they have a very difficult time even imagining how they could have done it today, these individuals were able to put up one piece of rock that's 1,000,000 tons or something like that. It's incredibly heavy, and they were able to erect it in perfect balance without falling over. That's what gets me. It didn't fall over, because if they had accidents with these things, like you'd see it. There's a big obelisk toppled over here, and they wouldn't pick it up. Obviously, if it had, but none of them were like that. It appears that they got them perfectly. They got them in balance. I mean, these are incredible structures, miraculous, magical, in the way that they were able to erect them and to create them and to make them so perfect in their proportions. And yeah, there's a lot to be said about the obelisk. There's a second one behind there, as a matter of fact. Yeah, there's two of them. Yeah, I think it's Tutmos and Hatshepsut. And this, of course, tells us that for a 3,000-year culture, there were definite rules and canons by which proportion and depictions of let's say things that were important, because they did do domestic stuff all over the place, but all of it was in dedication to the gods and to the pharaoh, who was basically the transmitter, the manifestation of the guide of our conscious evolution, which was at that time thought to be the sun, or at least associated with the sun, which wouldn't be a bad idea. And you can see through the skirt, there's a kilt, supposedly a kilt, but look at it. It's actually a pyramid. And look where the force is. It's in the lower regions. It's in the pelvic area. So this is representing the solar force of the pharaoh in terms of sexual power, too, of the force and possibly the use of sexual energy for the higher work that a pharaoh actually did. Not just taking, comfortable and relaxing cruises down the Nile with, fanned and all that. No, they had a real purpose for being what they were and what they were intended to do as that. It was a position of great, great responsibility, because they were basically the channels of Mat, the truth, and what that meant in terms of the ordering and the evolution, that you went for in the optimal way for every moment. And that's what the Pharaoh did, was to connect with the immediate necessity of that cosmic dance, of the cosmic order. One of the interesting things that you'll notice is that a lot of these guys, the gods, have 2 left feet, so I've been told. But if it is true that, these guys only, walk like an Egyptian, is you walk with 2 left feet. Well, the point is that the connection that is portrayed by anything that is divine was that we could only see the passive aspect of that divinity, of that force. That, in fact, the active part was unseeable and perhaps unknowable by our own human perception at that point. But it also points to the fact that we need to make efforts to go beyond our passivity, to get into the activeness. Otherwise, all we're going to be confronted with is the surface of things and not the heart, not the core of things. Actively receptive to higher influences, higher communication, higher information, higher in the sense of not creating a division between what's behind, but opening into greater and greater wholeness, if that can be stated that way. So there are the canons, and they're very square, very solid. Carved in stone comes from the Egyptians, that term. And they did a lot of carving in stone, and it's lasted. And it's lasted to tell us things about ourselves even today. And this is, of course, the great stone ceiling from Dendera. Of the zodiac. It could be from Ptolemaic times, but the temple itself is much older, much older. A place of healing, kind of like Lourdes in France. And this, of course, conveys, like I said, the signs of the zodiac. And you can see them inside the bull, the ram, and so forth, all the way through on the inner circle of that. I think they've got a hippopotamus there too. But the art and the architecture, of course, of Egypt is without doubt the most well-known of all art of the ancient world. And it's thanks to the period, now called the Amarna period, that we owe most of this gratitude to. Yes, there are great monuments and great treasures that have been found from, well, let's say something of the old is not too much from the old kingdoms, except the Great Pyramids and so forth. But in terms of smaller art, not that much, and not as fine a quality. The Middle Kingdom, no. But then you get to the New Kingdom, and then you get to the rule of Akhenaten and Nefertiti, and you've really got, I think, the high point in some ways artistically, and perhaps in many other ways, of the entire purpose of what Egypt was set up for, was the idea of ascending, of transforming ourselves, of turning what is frozen light into active light. Basically, the photon is released and goes back to its source. The light returns to its source. And of course, the most well-known Egyptian figure, probably in terms of females, definitely, the bust of Nefertiti from the studio of the master sculptor in Amarna is one of the greatest masterpieces of human art. And to see it in person, it becomes it's even more powerful. I mean, this is over 3,000 years old, much more. Yeah, maybe 3,500 years old. And still, the fineness, the beauty, the balance, it is perfect. in every proportion. It uses the canons of art, but in a way that portrays a living, moving presence. And once again, if you look into her eyes and into her posture, you get the real sense of someone who's in authority, and yet it's not hard. There's a heart connected to that face, a real heart, and you can feel the heart. You can feel the openness of it too. So someone was able to do this. Someone who could feel that much that they could take an ephemeral, almost indescribable feeling and convert it into something solid like this, into something so exquisite in detail and in poise and in just integration of all the parts, that they were able to send this to us. And it's interesting because, of course, the Amarna era was from the time of Akhenaten, where the first real version of monotheism, or the worship of one deity, the principle of one, was established. And the Aten, so-called sun rays, the rays of the sun, but look at them, they're hands, and they're hands that are giving eternal life. Golly, could there be a message in this? Could there be a message to us, of the 21st century, or whatever century we are now? Let's not get too limited. Whatever century we are right now, could this message be telling us that somehow this light, this effulgent light, and look, the offering, there's the hearts. Those are hearts. They're giving up the hearts to these beings. I mean, to this sun disk. They call it the sun disk, but it's, hey, does that look familiar? That looks almost like that thing we saw at the Bhimbetka caves in India. 290,000 to 700,000 years old. Like 500,000 years old maybe. Same figure. And just the actual presence of something like that and the consciousness to understand it is trying to tell us something today. That we have an obligation to the entirety, to the whole, whatever you want to call it. But it's not based on separation. It is obviously a union, a communion with the Absolute, within ourselves. And this communion is what produces the eternal life. Because the communion is what generates the new creativity, the new creation. Yeah, something that never was is now. And so these are obviously the practices whereby that, that posture obviously is meant to be, it's the posture of giving, but it's the posture of giving freely. You see? Without taking back. You can't grab this, and you're offering it up, out of your reach. Yeah. So it's a posture of balanced equilibrium, but it's ascending. It's sending up the offering. It's offering something of it, and in return, in a sense, it's a conveyor. When you give it up, the ankh is transmitted down. It's interesting. It's very simple. It's very simple to give back. More than you receive, you get, interestingly, you get more back in return. And so this is a plan of Akhenaten, the first planned city in the world, I would say. It's the first planned city. Everything was based on a common theme, and that was to give reverence, not reverence. I think what is portrayed today in the Amarna, giving reverence to the Aten and worshiping the Aten, that's not what it's about. It's a co-creative activity with the source of light. With the source of light. Now think about it. This is the residences and the temples. Everything was planned. Everything. This is the first planned city on earth. And it was created by Akhenaten. He designed it. He was the motivation behind its existence. Akhenaten was incredibly beautiful, and it was fresh. It was a complete break from everything that had happened before. It was in its own space. There is no other place like it, and nothing came after it. This was a unique event in the history of humanity. Akhenaten. And Akhenaten, the pharaoh, and his lovely wife Nefertiti, and their son Tutankhamun, the son of Akhenaten, and one of his wives, are in fact from this era of a one deity focus, a one deity system of living. And it was all planned in accordance with that. And the thing was that it was open. It was interesting. These temples were open. They didn't have roofs. So that the light, the light from the Aten, the sun disk, but think about it. There's lots of religions and cultures that have books. In this book is all the truth that we believe in. And it's a book. It's a solidified piece of, bark and wood and pulp, and has been converted into something that we write our ideas on. But think about this, when you go out and you look at the sun and those rays are hitting you and they're giving you life and they're sustaining everything that exists on this planet, everything. But it could be just the light that exists beyond everything, the light that creates all the other light. A photon. We know them now, that's what we call light. The so-called entities that make up light, the photons. That photon was the Bible of that culture. So if you want to have a symbol like a cross or whatever, a crescent or a star, how about the actual light? And that was the only thing that was allowed to be worshipped. You didn't have a book, you didn't have it was just a direct contact with light itself. That is a pretty profound, a very profound principle. And to have described that, and to have tried to establish that, even for an instant, obviously, the earth-bound, heavy stone structures and basically the solidity of that culture wouldn't allow it to last for more than 17 years. And afterwards, this temple, this incredible temple, which is puny when you look at the whole layout of Akhenaten. It's this guy up there, that skinny little thing up there in the middle of that other rectangle. That's the great temple. So this place was huge. And the temple for the Aten was huge as well. And you went, through various stages, and each stage had various numbers of pillars. So everything was geometrically and symmetrically and eurythmically, in terms of a certain kind of inner rhythm that was harmonious, was throughout the entire structure. There was a meaning to the numbers. There was a meaning to the shapes and the sizes of the different passageways and chambers that you went through until you got to the Holy of Holies. But the Holy of Holies was empty. It was like the Aten. There's nothing there. You think you got an image. No. There's just the light that's hitting your eyes is the teaching, is the symbol. I mean, you were an integral part of the symbol itself. So, this was the great temple. Huge. Apparently one of the most beautiful structures on earth, or the most beautiful structure on earth at that time. And it was like this. This is one example from the small temple, one of the small temples, which was pretty big, and it was just gorgeous. the way it was painted and developed, and now what we have left of all of our Amarna, this huge, beautiful planned city, all that we have left now is that pillar and that stump. That's it, folks, because I guess the reaction to this unified focus that was going away from conquest, was going away from conflict, that was going away from a dualistic and conflicted approach to existence. This is the teaching and the belief that Akhenaten was spreading, was this unified approach to everything, that everything would come together. Just look at it, just look at light. I mean, that should be the most obvious thing, that somehow light is keeping us alive, it's giving us life, and it has the possibility of giving us something that will make it possible for us to transcend our limited death finality kind of condition, where we don't end in death, that we go, and that just to follow the light, to go into the light and to recognize the light coming from in you, offering up your light to the light so that it returns to you, is the way to immortality. But all that was left of it after that is this: it was razed to the ground. The memory, the memory. Literally, they carved their names out. They chiseled their names out of every single monument. Akhenaten and Shmenkera and whoever else followed him, Tutankhamun. They were all obliterated by this general, Horemheb, who became the pharaoh after, and the prime minister, the great minister of 3 or 4 different pharaohs, who became pharaoh after Tutankhamun. It was just an amazing and yet difficult time for humanity, because something great that was potentially possible to happen was completely eradicated. And they destroyed everything. Everything was obliterated, so that nobody knew about these guys. And so, irony of ironies, they stuck them inside the casings of their own temples and used the materials and stuff, but they used them as fill. And so now we have more information about the Amarna epoch and that short 17-year period, or between, however long, 50 years maybe, 40 years. That period is known about more than probably any other in terms of how much attention is given to it. And it's thanks, of course, oh yeah, there it is. That's what's left. Flattened to the ground. But what's resulted is that because this person was totally not known about, Tutankhamun, or his father or mother, or any of the people around him, he was ignored. He was not a big pharaoh. He was not well known. He had a short reign, and basically because his name was obliterated from everything, he was anonymous until the present day, practically, until the 1900s. And then they discovered, because everyone passed him over, they discovered what became the greatest treasure that has ever been discovered in any archaeological find. I mean, yes, there have been other wonderful discoveries, but when you look at the power and the focus and attention of the work, this is the beautiful gold sarcophagus mask that went over the actual mummy of Tutankhamun, and you see the workmanship of this piece. I mean, this is the high point of art, at least at one point on this planet. It is one of the high points. It is incredible, just the serenity, just the way that it's put together, and the coloring and everything else. It's immaculately perfect. It's a perfect piece of art, and it's the one thing that came to us and is now broadcasting back to us the information about what happened at Amarna with Akhenaten, the father of Tutankhamun, and just the message. Interestingly, and try to to wipe out. All the temples of Karnak, even the Great Pyramids. This is what people relate to the most. King Tut is the most famous Egyptian of all time. And he was basically obliterated from history. But the universe has its own intentions for what it gives to us. And so King Tut was, in fact, given the place of awakening us to the teachings of the unified cosmic giving. Once again, it's not an uncommon theme. We saw that in Mesoamerica. We see that in every culture where higher principles are lived and attempted. And it doesn't have to be in some kind of opulent place of great, splendid wealth and art and all the rest of it. No, it has to do with an inner state. But the Pharaoh was intended to be a demonstrator of this divine presence as an example. It was meant to be an example. It wasn't just meant to be a utilitarian, power-oriented kind of function that these individuals played. They were, in fact, transmitting information about our own inner potential. But let's get to the basis of the teachings of the Egyptians. We know very little, actually, other than the incredible monuments they left behind, the powerful art, the presence of which is still active today. It still affects us. It can affect us. Go into the presence of any of some of these great artifacts, like the mask or Nefertiti's bust or some pictures of Akhenaten. You will feel it, or like a croupier who's at the Louvre in Paris. Those works were intended to transmit real information to us, and what we get from it is based on how awake we are. But awake or asleep, the one thing that we owe a huge debt of gratitude to the Egyptians for is what's now called Going Forth by Day, or sometimes called the Egyptian Book of the Dead. And this particular teaching reaches across all of time. It's as real today as it was then. Death is a factor to the human condition as it exists. And the Book of the Dead, or the Going Forth by Day, is, in fact, the guide book for navigating the waters, the space beyond our normal perception, beyond the death of the physical body. The physical body doesn't end it all. Nope. That's what they're trying to tell us. And yet, what gets us recycled, is inner duality. The feather of truth and one's own heart are in balance. Now, the point of balance is obvious. Neither attracted or repelled, neither too much or too little. No dualistic activity. No is happening in one's being. The heart represented the being, the inmost core, and so that's what's weighed. It's the inmost core of whatever we are is what is weighed, and basically it's our own truth. We know the truth. And the truth knows us because we're unified. And if we're unified, it's in perfect balance. If there's some kind of imbalance, something more than another, then we get sucked into the phenomenal world, into the world of chasing things, of acquiring things, of grabbing, of letting go, being forcing, all those kinds of things. All those push-pull kinds of events that we, in creating this deified heart, this heart that is true, the true heart is unbreakable. The true heart is completely unified. Unified. It cannot be thrown off balance. It is grounded in truth, in reality, whatever that may be. It's not a local, a momentary fashion of what we believe the truth to be today. It is whatever it is that gives us unshakable grounding. That's it. And that's what's being weighed during this process, where if one is able to be true to oneself, true to the reality that is perfect, in balance, then one goes on to visit Osiris here. Oops, the Lord of the Dead. As you can see on the right there, the green-headed guy. Isis and Nephthys behind him, supporting him. But it's also not just death, it's about resurrection, about transcending death. So the whole journey is about transcending death. We can see that the weighing is just a process, part of the process. And once one ascends, then one is, in fact, has achieved that life of eternity within oneself. One has realized the perfect equilibrium. And so this is what the Egyptians brought us. I think above everything else, beyond all other teachings that have come from there, it tells us about a conscious way of navigating beyond death. Okay? That's the message. From all of Egypt, the one that we really get, that we can use even this instant, is that we can be conscious at the moment of death and through death, and that if we just allow ourselves to be opening up to it, we can go through it consciously. We can go forth in today, into the light. We can't get away from it, sooner or later. Of course, if the scales are not in balance and they're tipped, if there's an imbalance of some sort, then Ammit, the little eater of hearts, basically, he's not very big, but he's big enough to eat the heart. That's the cycle. Think about it this way, that Ammit represents not only just the devouring and destruction of the heart. That's not true. What's happening is that Ammit is the process of being recycled into a recurring universe. Now we have, we don't remember that we've been to this, judgment and this point of balance. Actually, the giving up of judgment is what's really happening. We have to give up all judgment of ourselves in order to go beyond being judged. When you're alone, when there's no one, when there's nothing there, and no gods and goddesses, just the balance. The balance is oneself. And so, that heart, and going through the different stages of the duat, or the bardo as it's called in Tibetan terminology, or the labyrinth as it's called in American terminology. The different books of the dead, from the Egyptian down to the Tibetan to the American, all of them are telling us about our inner potential. The less of us there is in reality, the more of us there is in truth. It's an interesting way of expressing it, but that's really what's going on. This, in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, is telling us that we can be conscious through death. Doesn't matter about the pylons and how Egypt was built as basically a model, a physical model of the spiritual realm, and that the Pharaoh went to these different stations, and that was part of his work, was to create the kind of force that would help to elevate everyone, all of humanity, through that divinization of earthly existence, that you not only give up, but it comes down here, so that what was once the peak is now at the bottom of your feet. So the Book of the Dead is I think, one of the greatest works ever sent on to us. And to know this is to know our own reason for being. And now I think we're finishing for this evening. It's been a long journey. I hope you've been able to be present with us through this, and maybe something of interest has come of it. I think at this point we're going to have Deborah Judith play an invocational piece to these wonderful, wonderful cultures. So we'll try it. Give us a minute as we do our final wrap here, and listen to these wonderful invocations musically from Deborah. Go ahead.